So, the year was 1769. A young boy was born on the island of Corsica. He was the third son of a family, a well-to-do family. He grew up, he was given so many of the things that other people in his neighborhood were not given because his dad was an attorney. His dad was an affluent attorney. And he had opportunities presented to him that no one else had. As he grew up, he enrolled in schools. He transferred to the island of Italy. He didn't speak Italian very well. He was made fun of. He was short. They made fun of that. So he poured himself into reading and studying. This young man, by the time he was 23, he was a brigadier general. In 1799, he became the first consul for the entire country of Italy. By 1804, he was declared emperor. Over the next 7 years, up until 1811, he would conquer the majority of Europe. He would go into battles. He was renowned for his ability, his military ability to just see things in a different way, using tactics that are still studied today in the military schools. This young man who at 35 became emperor of a lot of the world at that time in Europe was Napoleon. And Napoleon, I'm sure, sat back at age 35 and thought, look at all I have done. I have accomplished so much, and I have conquered so much of the world. I may be short in stature, I may not be able to speak, but I have shown those guys who made fun of me. And I thought about that, and I thought, I wonder how many times in my life, maybe in your life, that you've actually sat back and reflected on your life and think, look at all that I have done. I have accomplished so many great things. It could be different. It could be different in a lot of different ways. For some of you, it could be looking at your children and seeing them grow up and seeing them accomplish the things that you never were able to accomplish, and you stand back and you say, look what I did. Or maybe, like for me, it was it was building something for the first time. I built an outdoor fireplace. And I'd never built anything, but I had the plans, I had the diagrams, and I worked hard on that. And I built it, and I stood back and I looked, and I thought, look what I have accomplished. Maybe also for me, it was something along like this. It was me building a law practice that was large, that I then sold to another attorney, and walked away from the law profession for 5 years. And then coming back 5 years later and starting to practice with no clients and being able to build that thing up to bigger than it was, making more money than it was when I sold it 5 years ago. And I can't help but think, I did something incredible. So, I want you to take a few minutes at your table, 30 seconds each. What is that accomplishment in your life where you just sat back and you said, look what I've done. This is awesome. This is incredible. Look what I've accomplished. Look what I've built. 1, 2, 3, go.
Other people?
What were some of the things? Ron was at age 46 walking across and picking up his diploma and getting his GED. That is something to be proud of. For HB, on the other hand, there's much lower bar. He got out of bed this morning. Yeah! It was about, as a kid, trading bicycle parts, and he had this orange bike, and he got And you were awesome on that orange bicycle, weren't you? And the orange shoes. Anything else that was outstanding that you heard at your table? Steve, anything back there?
Well, just Paul was talking about a fence he put up years and years ago and went back recently, and he's just admiring how straight it was.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that is a sense of accomplishment. It's like, I did that well. I mean, and you sit back and you say, that's awesome. After all these years, after all of this struggle, after moving into all of this, this is awesome. But think about Napoleon. There comes a point in time in his life, in our lives, we get to that place where we stand back and we look and say, this is all, look at all that I have done, and you feel good, and then you start making the stupid mistakes. In 1812, Napoleon decided that Russia was not bowing down to him as emperor. So he amassed a group of 500,000 men, the largest army that had ever been assembled at that time. And he marched into Russia in the middle of winter. Contrary to what all of his advisors told him to do, he decided he knew what was best. He was the emperor. He had already beat the odds and conquered all of these other territories when they told him it could not be done. And in his arrogance, it was also his downfall. 500,000 men walked into Russia. 40,000 walked out. Massive, massive losses. And then the arrogance of Napoleon to be able to go back to Paris and throw this huge party and blame the loss solely because of the weather. It was that arrogance that eventually led to his downfall. And then if I think about myself, I go back to that place where I've spent most of my life looking at the things and all the accomplishments that I have done. And I think, I am awesome. I have accomplished this. Now, maybe some of you don't feel that. All right? Maybe some of you won't actually acknowledge that. Because you say, well, it sounds like I'm boasting or I'm prideful. But I'm asking you to go down deep. Really, those thoughts that are in your head, you may not say them. You may not be vocal like me and actually will say that out loud. But down deep inside, there is that sense of pride, of arrogance that wells up inside of us when we look at all that we have done and all that we have accomplished. For me, it was so much of those things. I could sit here the rest of the morning and tell you time after time after time that I have stepped back and I look and I see. I can be honest with you. Sometimes when I walk into Engage and I think about where we started 6 years ago, I can go to this place where I can sit back and I say, you know, we started with a couple guys. And now we have hundreds. And over the year, we probably have had thousands of different men come through here. And I can very easily, in my mind, go to that place where I say, look what I did. God brought me here, but this is what I did. And I think some ways, and sometimes, I actually go to that place where I take the credit for what God had already done. And he just happened to use me. And then I think back, and I realize, this is what I realize. I have been king of my world my entire life.
I wouldn't have asked where you got that.
Think about it. There is that sense of superiority. There is that sense, I got it off of Napoleon. There is that sense of superiority that I see in my life when I look at other people and I look down on them. And I think, I'm superior. When when I go to that place and I look at my accomplishments and I say, they're just stupider than I am. I'm smarter than the rest of them. I'm just going to say all the things that I know we all think. We all think that we're better. We all think that we have a sense of right to the lives that we've led. And yet, I find myself sitting on my throne and looking over my world, whatever that little world may be, and sensing I have accomplished so much. The Bible tells a story about a man called Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon. He had spent so much of his life building this mammoth group of men, and they had invaded all the countries, and they had built this large country. And they had gone down and invaded Israel and taken people back. In fact, Daniel was one of the people that he had taken back there. But we start off in chapter 3, where Nebuchadnezzar builds this large statue of himself and tells everybody, I am great, I am God, I want you to bow down and worship me. That went badly. We come to chapter 4, and this is the way it starts, of Daniel. It says, I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at home in my palace, contented and prosperous. Have you ever been there, where you just sit back and you think, I am content, I am doing well, I have been prosperous, maybe not money-wise, but maybe it's just in the things that you have accomplished. And you sit back and you rest and you look around and you think, this is awesome. My life is good. I have accomplished so much. Nebuchadnezzar, shortly after that, has a dream. And he has this dream that disturbs him. And so he calls Daniel in, and Daniel interprets the dream for him. And Daniel essentially warns Nebuchadnezzar, if you don't turn away from all of your pride and all of your arrogance, you will lose the entire kingdom. A year later, I'm sure Nebuchadnezzar, in the middle of that, right after he had been told what the meaning of the dream was, I'm sure he probably sat back and he said, yeah, I need to do better. And I'm sure he tried harder. Maybe he took some time and actually reflected on what Daniel had said. Maybe he made some changes. But the Bible starts off and says this. "12 months later, as the king was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon, he said, is not this the great Babylon I have built as my royal residence, by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty?" Can you see it? Him standing over top Babylon, one of the greatest cities of the ancient world. It was the place where Nebuchadnezzar had built the Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And he had to sit back and look over the vast land and the palaces and the gardens and smelling the roses and thinking, look what I've done. I have built this for myself. And this is what awesome looks like. And this is what happened. The words were still on his lips when a voice came from heaven. This is what is decreed for you, King Nebuchadnezzar. Your royal authority has been taken from you. Just that fast. Just immediately. God said, I've had enough of your arrogance. I've had enough of you glorifying yourself. Do you realize, Nebuchadnezzar, that everything that you have and everything that you've accomplished and everything that has been done is because I gave that to you. I gave you the opportunity. You were just being used for my glory, not yours. But this is enough. And he ended up losing his mind and living like an animal for 7 years. For 7 years, he lived outside in the wilderness, I'm sure at some points in time looking up at the palace that he had lived in for all those years, walking around in the gardens that he had been in. And I wonder if he thought, look at all that I have lost. For 7 years, that happened. And then at the end of 7 years, it says in verse 34, at the end of the time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes toward heaven, and my sanity was restored. Then I praised the Most High. I honored and glorified him who lives forever. His dominion is an eternal dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All of the peoples of the earth are regarded as nothing. He does as he pleases. But the powers of heaven and the peoples of the earth, no one can hold back his hand or say to him, what have you done? At the same time that my sanity was restored, my honor and splendor were returned to me for the glory of my kingdom. My advisors and nobles sought me out, and I was restored to the throne and became even greater than before. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven, because everything he does is right, and all of his ways are just. And those who walk in pride, he is able to humble. We've been talking about glorifying for the last couple weeks. This is the last talk of the glorifying, and next week will be the application. And I can't help but think, as we talked about this glorifying, that we talk about it, we say that we want to glorify God, we say that we try to glorify God, but do our lives really reflect that? I have to tell you, just 2 days ago, I'm sitting in a conversation and I'm talking about one of our brothers who I am really struggling with, because his choices, in my mind, are wrong. He doesn't seek wise counsel, and I think he is making the wrong decisions. And there is this righteous indignation inside of me, saying, how could you do this after everything that we have done for you? And God kind of stopped me and said, and that's what I'm talking about. Do you glorify me in those conversations? And I have to say, no, I don't. Do I still struggle with this man? Yeah, I do. Will I always? Probably so. But I think God wanted to teach me something, even in the middle of that. To say, Stephen, you're not in charge. This is not your life. And so I asked that question, am I reflecting me? That's an awesome hat. Or am I reflecting God? Am I reflecting me to everyone that's out there? Am I reflecting the things that I have accomplished and that I have done? Or am I reflecting what God has done in my life? Do the people see Jesus by my actions, by my words, by my relationships? Yeah, sometimes. But then I've realized I got a long ways to go. We all do. But it is a time of reflection, to look at yourselves in this mirror Just look. What do you see? Do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as God sees you? Or do you see yourself as you see yourself? Proud, in many ways arrogant? Are you glorifying yourself? Is it all about you? Is it all about your name? Or is it about His? And what does that really look like? So, what are you reflecting today is the question. And I have to be honest, I much prefer to look at myself and say, I have accomplished so much. And I am proud of myself. I am proud of the accomplishments that I have done. But what I need to look at is that God has given me the ability to do certain things and to be a certain person so that He gets the glory, not me. My life is not my own. I was bought with a price. In 2 Corinthians chapter 3, it says, But whenever anyone turns to the Lord, the veil is taken away. Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And we, who with unveiled faces all reflect the Lord's glory. We all reflect the Lord's glory, are being transformed into His likeness with an ever-increasing glory which comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. I don't reflect. I don't reflect that well. I reflect myself more than I do God. I just know I do. And if I'm honest with myself, it's more about me and my glory and my name and my accomplishments than it is about His. And honestly, I can try harder, just like I'm sure Napoleon did. I can try harder, but I don't think that's the answer. No matter how hard I tried, there is always going to be that battle going inside of me. What I've got to do is I've got to surrender. I've got to acknowledge that I am this way. In spite of all of my flaws, God still wants to use me and you the way He created us. So what will that look like in your life? That's what we're going to explore this morning. What will that look like? The questions are going to ask you to explore different areas. Am I glorifying God or am I glorifying myself in my attitude? Does my attitude about things in my life reflect God's priorities or mine? In my actions, is what I'm doing more inclined to enhance my reputation or God's? In my dreams and goals, am I pursuing what God has designed me for and gifted me to do? So in doing what I'm good at and doing it in such a way it has a positive impact on others. Relationships, am I considering others better than myself? Serving someone else with sacrificial love? Now, 4 areas, pick one. Pick one that you struggle with the most. Pick one and talk about it. And then at the tables, pray. And ask each other, how do we do this? How do we even do this together? How do I back off from my arrogance and my pride and all of those things inside of me and allow God to move and God to get the glory? It's more than words. Really go down deep. Be honest in your minds. Because it's there. We all have it. I don't care who you are. We all have this. And we will all struggle with this. Because, honestly, I am awesome. I am the king. And God wants to take me off of my throne and put him there. And I will always struggle. So, let's have the conversations. Let's move into something. And let's figure out what it really looks like to glorify God in our lives every day. Not just on Sunday, not just here, but every day in relationships, in attitudes, in conversations, in whatever it is that you struggle with. That's where he wants to take us today. Okay? One thing I know, when I walk out of here, multiple times during the week, I'm going to go to that place, and I'm going to put my crown back on. I know I'm going to do it. I think it's in my nature. Because down deep inside, it's a terrible thing to say, but I do believe that I am extremely awesome. I do believe that.
Well, God made you.
But God made me, exactly. So, how do I take that and glorify him? It's by doing everything that I do in an extremely awesome way for his glory. And taking those feelings of grandeur that I have and taking it off and setting it down and giving him the glory. It's a step by step. One day, one moment, one time after time. Because I will want to pick this up again. And you will too. But with the Holy Spirit, those of us who are believers, we have a right to call on to something that is inside of us, that is screaming for an opportunity. But we have to surrender. The cool thing is about Nebuchadnezzar, the coolest thing is that God could have destroyed him, but he didn't. He merely wanted to destroy his pride so that Nebuchadnezzar could come out of those 7 years of living like an animal and glorify God to his people, to the nations surrounding, and everyone else who knew the story of how proud a man this was, how he had been taken down to it living as an animal, and now he's glorifying God. Been there. Been taken all the way down. I know God didn't want to destroy me. He just wanted to take the pride and the arrogance. So ask yourself the question this week. Look in the mirror. As you're driving down the road, look in that rearview mirror. As the guy cuts off in front of you, look in the rearview mirror. Who am I reflecting? Am I reflecting myself, or am I reflecting him? Because somebody else is looking at you through that same mirror and asking the same question. So who will you reflect this week as you make the hard decisions, as you move into the difficult situations, as you're asked to do the compromising things that you just don't want to do? Who are you going to reflect? You or him? And it's not going to be easy. So reach out. Call a brother. Bring them along on the journey with you. Get them to pray with you and walk with you through that. And maybe just one step at a time, move in and ask yourself the question, how can God get the glory out of this situation, out of this obstacle, out of this decision, out of this pain? How can God get the glory for that? Jerry, would you pray? Close us.